In today's panel, Amy Holmes, political analyst, former speechwriter for former Senate Majority Leader Bill Frist, Matt Welch, editor-in-chief of Reason magazine, Christina Greer, associate professor of political science at Fordham, author of Black Ethnics, and finally Harry Enton, senior political writer at 538. All right, what's the purpose, having worked on Capitol Hill, I keep going back and forth on what this meeting was about today, right? So one way of thinking of it is this is essentially a made-for-TV moment where where essentially it's all been foreordained. Like, they're going to unify, he's the nominee of the party. And the other is that these are real meetings with people who have real differences who really have to be brought on board. Which of those do you think it is?
It's a real meeting, and it wasn't made for television because if you notice, they were not photographed or recorded actually together, shaking hands, hugging.
Good point.
You know,
they did not do the standard photo op when you make a made-for-television meeting.
Exactly. But I spoke today with a former RNC official, his thoughts on this, and he said, look, Paul Ryan has to walk a fine line. I also spoke with a K Street lobbyist, one of the establishment, who's very plugged into the Republican establishment, and she said as well, Paul Ryan needs to walk a fine line, both in terms of, you know, trying to create unity with the party, but as Luke Gressert was mentioning, not necessarily soiling his own hands in case Donald Trump goes way off the reservation, but that they need to find points of common ground. I'm sure you've heard sort of this verbiage among Republicans saying, well, I will support him, but I won't endorse him. You might see Paul Ryan arrive at that sort of formulation.
I just don't think, I mean, from a political standpoint and from a polling standpoint, I mean, I think that's going to work for anyone. Here, let me just give an example of what this is going to look like. And I don't know if he's going to be a drag on Republicans or he'll be a ballast to them. That is yet to be seen. Democrats certainly think he's a drag. This is Strickland, who's running against Rob Portman for Senate, okay, in Ohio, of putting out a statement attacking Portman for being in a face-to-face meeting. The guy hasn't even endorsed him yet. This is Senator Portman's face-to-face meeting, Donald Trump, is another reminder Portman has pledged his devotion to the most toxic presidential nominee in modern history, a desperate move that is turning off moderate Republicans, alienating independents, and energizing Democrats in Ohio. It goes on. So I guess Portman has endorsed him, but you are tied to him whether you like it or not.
Exactly. You're tied to him no matter what you do, and we've seen an increasingly strong relationship over the past few cycles between the presidential vote and the Senate vote and the House vote. So
people do not split their tickets
anymore.
They're
not going to split their tickets. So you might as well join in with Trump and get the benefits of that instead of just not being with him and then people hate you either if you're a Republican because you're not with him, or you're a Democrat because supposedly you've endorsed him and that's what your candidate said.
But the counter to that is that Paul Ryan, in his case, is actually wildly popular in his district in Wisconsin, and Donald Trump lost that district to Ted Cruz by 20 points. So for Paul Ryan, in terms of his own political future and becoming reelected, it doesn't necessarily help him on the Trump train.
Let's be clear also that I don't think Paul Ryan is thinking that much about his future, spending all of it in that district.
Right, not in that.
I mean, I think he's looking at numbers outside that district.
Sarah Palin's, threat to canter him, I don't think it's going to go anywhere.
There are lots of members of the House who have looked at the district, and if they're looking at their district numbers and Trump, blew certain opponents out the water, then they're very quickly on the Trump bandwagon.
We're having one on my show every night at 8 p.m.
Exactly.
We lead off every night with someone who didn't vote for Trump who's saying, I'm there. And what they're doing is they're looking at their district.
Their own poll numbers. But I think it's brilliant for Democrats to use Trump as a strategy to say any Republican is now a Trump supporter.
Yes.
Whether
that's exactly right.
They've said nothing, whether they've endorsed him or just said, well, we need to think about it for the party. It's brilliant because you can capture a lot of moderate Republicans who don't want to ban Muslims. They don't want to ban the new mayor of London. They don't want to deport all Latinos and immigrants. Like, these are, even though there are statements he made in the past, these are still statements that he holds true on. And there are several independents and moderate Republicans that don't agree with him.
And Luke's point, I think, about this is key, right? Because the problem, when you talk about the things he's already said, and there's a huge line, and you could even go for hours on the stuff he said about women, and I mean, it's
blacks.
It's endless. The blacks, we even have all forgotten about the birtherism, which because it was the thing that launched him in his political career, has sort of been, but that's going to come back too.
So
right?
2006.
Right, exactly. Like all that will be back. The problem, if you're any of these people, particularly Ryan, Matt, is that as soon as you do endorse him, you then own everything he says going forward. Yeah. So you now, when you endorse him, whatever crazy thing he says in June, July, August, September, October, that's now yours also.